Pianogate. The sound of that phrase in your ears should tell you something. The taste of it crawling from my tongue is unsavory. This incident sucks. It's cringe, and vulgar, and overblown. Even a suffix so thoroughly abused as gate seems too weighty for it. However, I do have something to say about it. Let's be very clear from the outset. I don't think the Chinese group were in the right, but rereading the tired record of their petty crimes is something I'll leave to the right-wing talking heads for whom this incident was such a rave. No, I'm more interested in convincing you that the internet got this thing wrong. No one was in the right. As simply as ever possible, this is the inevitable iconoclastic video essay, Brendan Kavanagh bad.
Do not touch her. You're miming me. You're miming me. You're miming me. Oh, sorry.
I mean, I don't go in looking for trouble, but there's something about the danger of playing in an unauthorized way that really attracts the social media audience.
Brendan was in it for the bit. For however much he may love Taiwan or Boogie Woogie, at the most fundamental level, Brendan was in it for the bit.
Basically, I think it's a free speech issue. I think everyone should be able to express themselves in public, and if people don't want to be filmed in public, they should just walk away. Hit the like button if you agree.
In principle, there's nothing wrong with a good bit, but really, truly, a bit can be taken too far.
The idea was that he was some kind of handler for the CCP and that he was a diplomat and he could have been armed.
No one was armed. Or, as Brendan put it,
the information came out about who these people were, and they're a bunch of wussies, you know, a complete bunch of wussies.
Let's set the scene. Brendan was streaming himself playing the piano and messing with the group of Chinese people when Meng Ying asked Brendan, quietly, to delete his recording, and Brendan said no, in an impolite way. Mr. Angry asked him again, loudly. Brendan said no again, still impolitely, and Adelina asked him again, with middling intensity, and Brendan said no again, still impolitely. The group of Chinese people fetched the police, Carey talked to Brendan, nothing much came of it, and the rest is history. Oh, and Jim? Jim was just a chill guy the whole time.
That's just the
Please don't touch her.
I like Jim. So, how did we go from asking quietly, to asking loudly, to the police, to this?
About the centre of it, Brendan Kavanagh joins me right now.
Such a fall into ignominy surely requires a mighty explanation. Perhaps the incident was a CCP operation, replete with guns and spies and international drama. If you'd asked Brendan, that's the impression he might have given you.
That guy was a handler, and watching the footage, he was doing what a close protection officer would be doing. It was a spy operation. They were using a classic diamond or box formation, and the lady with the makeup may be a party official's daughter or wife, which is why he got very shirty when you touched the flag. Senior CCP spy Christine Lee was spotted there. It's now been confirmed. As for being armed, he may have been.
Or perhaps it was a microcosm of civilizational conflict between East and West, an insidious undercurrent of authoritarianism writ large on the station floor. Again, if you ask Brendan, that's something like the impression you'd get.
A clash of cultures in a 10-minute drama, a mini parable about freedom, artistic freedom. This whole thing was a mini parable about the value of free speech. A storm in a teacup, caused by the fact that I said no to the Chinese communist demands. Simple as that.
But if you ask me, the incident was simply a case of arrogance, ignorance, antagonistic behavior, and perverse incentives. A personal drama where Newton was angry and, hey, Brendan was in it for the bit.
Oh yeah, of course, we've got the Chinese here.
This, dear viewer, is what we call poisoning the well.
Do you need to, I see, because we're here film for Chinese TV as well.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, did you film as all of us in your cameras?
I don't know, are we allowed?
And that, dear viewer, is what we call lying. Brendan knows full well he's filmed the group.
Stay there because there's all sorts of things going on in the station. Interesting people around the piano today.
I mean, they were the subject of his recording not 4 minutes ago.
There's a whole Japanese team. I think she's nice. She go, hello, can you dance? Can you do a dance? Let's get this girl to dance. Yeah, can you dance? Can you done. Not done.
Sorry.
Okay, she's not done. It's okay. Whatever. I think the British girls are more fun.
But lies and uncomfortable requests besides.
I don't know. Are we allowed?
No.
We're not allowed.
Yeah. So
We're not allowed.
You're not allowed because we're for Chinese TV.
Oh, okay.
This is non-disclosable.
Not allowed, eh? Ridiculous, isn't it? And, yeah, it's plainly hypocritical, given the Chinese group are literally here with the intention of filming. But also, not allowed? They're choice words, really. Brendan's choice to really kick his bit into gear. The danger of playing the piano in an unauthorized way, as he puts it. It's a bit of Brendan's that he's been practicing for some time.
You know the shouty guy. He looks like a gangster. He nicked me bag before Christmas. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he's got a shouty guy. Started shouting. He said, "Respect my authority."
This is Daniel, and he's been suffering through Brendan's introduction of this guy, who Brendan and his friend Terry Miles encountered 16 days prior to the incident, also at Pancras. Oh, and I didn't add the Oblivion music in case you were wondering. Brendan did that.
Do you know him? Do you know? Is he your mate? Where is he? I've got a beef with him. Is he? What's his name?
I don't know if we're talking about the right person.
Yeah, what's his name? The guy with the gangster things. Terry was there with his green bag and he came up and he took my bag illegally and he kind of searched it. I've got a beef with him. Where is he? What's his name?
Then you'll be best off reporting it to Network.
I'm reporting it to. What's his name?
Clearly, Brendan is not fond of this shouty guy's use of authority. He's also not fond of letting Daniel speak. Despite the barrage, though, Daniel's response is useful and polite.
Oh, yeah, but it's your issue. I can't go and report your issue on your behalf.
As a matter of fact, Brendan already had ample opportunity to report it himself, and to get the shouty guy's name, who, because I can't see it on the ID card he's about to show Brendan, we will call Mr. Security.
I want your name. I want to report you, mate.
Here you go, sir.
What is
You
your
take it
name?
down. You take it down, sir. You got a piece of paper?
Do you think you've got
Sir,
the right attitude?
sir, have you got a piece of paper, sir?
Do you know it's Christmas?
Sir, have you got a piece of paper? Do you want the name, yes or no?
No, I want a happy Christmas.
Contrary to what one might imagine, given how many times Brendan asks Daniel, then, Mr. Security's name is clearly of little concern to him when compared to making jokes at the officer's expense. Brendan doesn't really care about his bag being searched, he's just in it for the bit.
What's that in there? Is that what's that?
This radio.
Can I see it? Can I have a go? No? Oh, okay. Is it actually real?
Just to be crystal clear, Brendan asks if he can see the radio, if he can have a go, and if the radio is real. This is embarrassing. What's more embarrassing is making fun of someone for working a decent job. Actually, what Brendan's doing is undermining the role of security as a function of the bit, never mind the insulting collateral.
Are you actually real? Are you actually real security? Or
I'm not really security.
what are you?
I'm just
Just sort of hanging around.
No, I've got a purpose.
What's your purpose?
Tell people that the lift not working.
Tell people that the lift's not working. Okay,
Yeah,
but what about that middle seat?
That's network ground. That's
And you get that sorted.
I can report it. I can't get it sorted. I can't guarantee.
Okay. So how's your first day at work going?
And it's this poor guy's first day. I mean, I think this speaks for itself. As, for worse or worse, does Brendan, and he continues regaling Daniel of his encounter with Mr. Security.
Do you want to search my bag?
No, I don't, and I can't.
Really?
No, I don't need to touch it.
Really?
Yeah.
It wasn't like your mate. He came and he grabbed it,
No.
and he said, step back from me. He nearly threw me on the floor.
Oh, wow.
He was having delusions of power. He was flexing his power muscles. Terry was extremely afraid. My mate Terry had to recover for a month.
Not that you'll need them, but I'll give you 3 guesses as to whether Brendan's recount of the incident is an accurate representation of reality. Jokes aside, if Kavanagh does a bad job here recounting the situation correctly, he does a pretty good job summing up the nature of his bit. That is, he wants a narrative, told through YouTube video, of security or an authority figure seeming to abuse that authority against him. And how does he go about procuring that? A modest helping of antagonism.
If this bag is here with you, and there's just some random one that's there, it's like,
But what about that bag?
Yeah, it's there next to him.
Yeah, but who's it belong to?
So what, is it not his then? So it was one of yours?
Might be. I'm not telling you.
Well, it's going to be removed, sir.
Why?
Sorry, are you filming?
Yes.
Is this your bag, sir?
It's candid camera or what?
Is this your bag, sir?
Well, it might be.
Question, sir, is this your bag?
I'm kind of getting intimidated now.
Sorry, sir, can I ask this to clear this area?
Wait.
No, sir. Excuse me, sir, can I ask you to clear this area?
For anyone who isn't familiar with why Mr. Security's question is important, unattended items in transport hubs are a genuinely serious security issue. According to the SES Group, Mr. Security's employer, unattended bags are of note because they may contain improvised explosive devices and are especially notable if hidden, obviously suspicious, or atypical. In asking Brendan if the arguably hidden bag is his, Mr. Security is taking the first reasonable step towards establishing whether the bag might be dangerous. That is, he's doing his job. Brendan, naturally, knows this as well as you and I, and understands that playing around with whether or not the bag is his is going to mess with Mr. Security, which is of course exactly why he does it. Because, you know it, he's in it for the bit. At this juncture, having effectively antagonized Mr. Security into taking what, in reality, is the only reasonable course of action, Mr. Kavanagh switches over into protesting his injury, and thus the narrative is complete.
What is inside of it, sir?
I've got a kazoo.
Mr. Security tries to bring the situation back into constructive territory, and just like that, Mr. Kavanagh is back to antagonizing again.
What? A kazoo!
Yeah? And what else is in there? Sir, don't touch the bag, sir.
I've got a kazoo.
Well, sir, I asked you, is it your bag? You told me no. Yeah? I'm asking you, sir, what is inside the bag, please, sir?
Hold on. I've got a kazoo in my bag.
Yeah? And what
a
else, sir?
kazoo.
What else, sir?
Well, can I show you the kazoo?
Well, you can't go into the bag, sir. I need to know what is inside the
A
bag.
kazoo. I showed
Yeah?
you.
And what else?
Do you know what a kazoo is?
And what else, sir?
Well, what is a kazoo?
What else, sir?
And then, as soon as Mr. Security rightly concludes that the whole thing is going nowhere,
Well, do you actually know what I'm
Alright,
talking about? Hey, that's my bag.
Brendan turns on the injured indignance again. The rest of the encounter follows much the same pattern, Mr. Security trying to be as reasonable as possible and resolve the situation, and Brendan trying his damnedest to prevent that from happening. In the end, Mr. Security searches the bag, returns it to Brendan, and tries to explain to the seemingly vastly ignorant pianist why he did what he did.
You obviously seem to take this whole thing for a joke, sir. This is not a joke.
What's not a
This
joke?
is not, security is not a joke, sir.
No, it's not
Security
a
is not a joke, so I'm expecting you, please, do not take it for a joke.
I'm not taking
Yeah?
it for
But
a
you
joke.
are, sir.
It's just a
Because I
joke.
simply approached you, yeah, you do not understand the dangers of this, yeah?
What's
I
the
could
danger?
evacuate the whole station because of this.
Because of my kazoo.
Because of an unattended item,
It's
sir.
got.
In due time, Brendan accuses him of lacking festive spirit,
Are you satisfied that it's not a terrorist threat, my bag?
As you can see, the bag has been gone back, so
Yeah.
therefore, I've already done, I've deemed it as
Would you
certified.
say that you've got the Christmas festive spirit?
and Mr. Security responds thus.
Well, when it comes to security, sir, unfortunately, you have to deal with security as it comes. You understand? I can't deal with it as it's play
Did you
because
see-
I don't play with people's lives.
but did-
Sir, I do not play with people's lives.
And I think that's a sentiment we can all get behind. This bit is Brendan's channel's bread and butter, raison d'etre, guerrilla warfare piano, as he christens it.
Not my bag yet. Unbelievable. They think I'm a terrorist.
People's man Brendan Kavanagh is fighting the good fight against petty authority figures trying to restrain his simple freedom to play the piano.
What?
Instrumental music, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Here you go, sir.
Are you going to apologise
Apologize for what, sir?
for being aggressive and
What do you mean aggressive, sir?
If you asked Brendan, he'd say that they abuse him for the benefit of their egos at the expense of his liberties.
I simply,
Shouting, and
sir,
you put
I
your
asked you
hand
multiple times,
No.
does this bag belong to you?
In reality, Brendan is only ever held up from the piano by his own taunting and jibing, or when he does something clearly against reasonable rules. Remember, if he'd just said the bag was his instead of prevaricating, none of this would have happened.
I asked you multiple times, I said more than once, does this bag belong to you? Yes or no?
Well, you asked me that
Yes or
twice.
no?
No, you asked
Yes
me
or
twice.
no?
You asked me
The textbook play is thus: annoy a worker or officer, play victim when he demands something of you, generate sympathy, and clicks.
I asked you, does the bag belong to you? Yes or no?
Well, why are you shouting? Can I have my bag back now? Oh my goodness, he's got an attitude, man, this guy.
But when Brendan tries the same thing on someone as cool and conciliatory as Daniel,
Is it alright if I play?
Oh, pause.
the gimmick is dead on arrival. All Brendan's efforts to get Daniel riled up have failed, and now his narrative is broken. Then, after devastating Brendan's groove, Daniel closes in to combo and hits Brendan with the
Same Pancras are like famous for their piano, but I'm just letting you know there's another one down there that might fully work if you want to play it.
floundering. Brendan fumbles out a weak restatement of his previous thesis,
Okay, what else do I have to do?
and calmly, humbly, and with understated precision, Daniel strikes the killing blow.
You don't have to do anything.
That reality right there is fatal to Brendan's entire bit. And if this really were the dramatised battle of words I presented it as, Brendan would surely be due to disappear in a sorry puff of defeated antagonism manifest. It is not, however, that dramatised battle of words, and is instead a real recording of a 60-odd-year-old man bullying a 20-odd-year-old at his first day working at the train station in order to make money on YouTube. And all while Daniel is trying simply to inform Brendan that there's a less damaged piano he can play instead if he wants. So Brendan ignores the fact that his narrative has been utterly dismembered and continues his bit, clearly making Daniel uncomfortable by grabbing his badge.
And so, what's your name? Daniel. Daniel. What's it like being an official person?
Same as any other.
I always feel when people got a badge on it makes them more kind of official. I don't have one of those.
It's more a high bid, probably making more.
And also you've got that thing as well. Do you have a taser?
No, not really. I don't need to use it. If anything, I'll just talk to people.
Alright.
But I'm just letting you know.
Alright, well thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you. You want to come?
Have a look good on camera.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. No, I think you're great.
Line by line, Brendan swings for the bit and Daniel denies it. Just as a note, I love that Daniel, intentionally or otherwise, completely disregards Brendan's angle of attack regarding the badge, ignoring the question of whether or not he has or should have authority, and instead disagreeing on the part of his uniform from which it takes its origin. And in terms of looking good on camera, Daniel, don't worry mate. In spite of Brendan's best efforts, you really do. Brendan, on the other hand, does not, consummating the unhappy marriage of his words and recorded media with a final unwarranted insult.
I think that's called like an NPC character.
Disgusting. I think how little the piano features in the Mr. Security encounter is illustrative of how important this bit is to Brendan's content. A similar observation applies to many of his other videos, as well as his conversation with Daniel and the incident with the Chinese group, which we will return to momentarily. Often, Brendan's bit is not an accompaniment to the piano, rather the piano is an accompaniment to the bit. So when Brendan pretends that people are trying to stop him from playing the piano, or some similar thing, he sidesteps the point at hand. Generally, people aren't trying to stop Mr. Kavanagh from playing the piano, they're trying to stop him from being antagonistic. Regardless, the bit goes on, and I argue it does a lot for explaining Brendan's behaviour with the Chinese group. After all, station security is one thing, but what more intimidating and less legitimate spectre of authority is there in the West than the CCP? In terms of appealing to some less tolerant audiences in particular, the CCP not allowing Brendan to film in London is a golden premise indeed. Brendan was in it for the bit, and truly...
It's a great TV.
I watched the whole video to get a proper context of it.
We're here with the Japanese TV crew filming about public piano. Right. Okay. I don't know. Are we allowed? We're not allowed. We're not allowed?
You're not allowed because we're for Chinese TV.
Oh, okay.
This is non-disclosable.
So you can see how Brendan manipulates Meng Ying's inexpert English to kick his bit into gear, framing the encounter as though the group are trying to tell him what he can and cannot do. By coincidence, the framing eventually becomes accurate to the instance, but this is no excuse for Brendan given Meng Ying had requested nothing of him at this stage. I wonder at the alternate scenario where Brendan, instead of being antagonistic, takes a frank and disarming approach, even a self-interested one where he gives no ground, from the get-go. He could easily have laid out in softer tones that he'd already live-streamed the group, that they couldn't tell him not to film, and that they could walk away if they didn't want more attention. Indeed, he could still have taken that line even after Meng Ying bites and says he's not allowed. Or, if he was feeling courteous, he could have explained all the same things and then offered to not upload his footage of them as a VOD, or to blur their faces or cut them out if he did. Or, perhaps, he could have nicely asked some useful questions in order to achieve a better understanding of the situation. Just hypothetically, that understanding might have included the group's intent to film for Chinese New Year, and that they, or the company they were working for, didn't want the surprise of their footage to be ruined. Equipped with this information, silly and impertinent as it was for the group to film in public if they wanted to avoid attention and had signed an NDA, all sorts of possibilities open up. Mr. Kavanagh and the group could have reached a compromise, for example, whereby Brendan agrees not to publish his footage in full until after Chinese New Year, and the group promotes him in their clip. Regardless of the specifics, the point is that Brendan had opportunities here, concessionary and otherwise, to end the confrontation before it had a chance to begin. But we know Mr. Kavanagh's not about that. So instead of doing anything remotely productive, he just makes fun of Meng Ying's accent.
It's not disco.
Yeah, not disclosable.
It's no disco.
It's not disclosable.
It's not disclosable.
Yeah.
Oh really?
Yeah.
After all, Brendan was in it for the bit.
So did you film the part that
So will we get in trouble with the Chinese government?
Maybe not, I don't know. But you said you're from Japanese.
No, they'll put you in prison, mate.
So just say that according to the Chinese law, we're not allowed to film you. Is that right?
So basically,
And so Brendan arrives at his thesis. But before Meng Ying denies it, they are both interrupted, and Mr. Angry makes his debut on the scene. Brendan and he spend some time re-establishing the basics of the situation, and soon enough Mr. Angry delivers the first of his more humorous lines.
Oh, no. It's just make sure that we are very, very secure in the reason that we don't want our voice or picture being filmed. And then, yeah, that's just the relationship between you and me. You and us, basically.
I mean, you expect me to take this seriously?
I'm sorry, this is the end of the conversation.
Brendan took it seriously. He thought Mr. Angry's funny lines were illustrative of a great deal about Mr. Angry's character and its provenance.
Clearly, this guy was used to being obeyed. Some Chinese people have said if you were shouted at like that in China, you'd be taken off to the camps, and because that shout puts the fear of God in you.
You would be playing the piano again.
I tend to think they're less illustrative of anything like that, and more illustrative of a lack of understanding of the finer points of English expression. Reading authoritarianism into Mr. Angry's broken temper and odd English, as Brendan does, reeks of the sort of body language expert charlatanry that claims comprehensive knowledge of a person's inner thoughts and dispositions from a still image of them shaking someone's hand. I mean, come on.
When you're in Rome, you do as the Romans do. Sorry.
You're Roman?
This is evidently a linguistic barrier before a cultural one. To say something like, clearly this guy was used to being obeyed, is simply an insult, not a point of any reason. And gee, the insinuation that Mr. Angry's insolent behaviour is a result of his Chinese heritage is a little suspect.
They accused you of being a racist, which obviously isn't true.
Indeed, these comments speak more to Brendan's and Graham's absurd beliefs than to any reality. But hey, Mike Graham also believed that you can grow concrete, so you shouldn't have needed me to raise the case for absurdity. In case you've forgotten.
How is it sustainable if you're killing trees?
Because it's regenerative, you can grow trees.
Right. Well, you can grow all sorts of things, can't you?
Well, you can't grow concrete.
You can. See you, Cameron. Cheerio. That was Cameron. He grows trees and then cuts them down and then makes things from them. Brilliant. Marvellous. I don't think I ever want to talk to any of those people.
So that's the caliber of news media Brendan finds favour with. Maybe they're fond of his piano playing.
You're playing beautiful piano, as you do. You're a very talented guy.
Thank you, Piers.
Then again, maybe they're fond of his rhetoric.
We're in a free country. Sorry. We're in a democracy. We're not in China. And that's not racist, that's the truth.
I'm pretty sure that being accused of racism when you've just said, "Are you from China?" It's not really racist to say, "Are you from China?" is it?
Not at all.
And while we're here, what exactly is this chap yapping about?
Not at all, but the fact that anything which could be construed by the most sensitive person on the planet as being racist is enough to put you in the dock.
Right.
And that's the way this ideology operates. And it's interesting that the Chinese, even the CCP people, know that they can weaponize. I mean, and they do this all the time. I mean, in Canada, for example, again, where I'm from, the Canadian government and a bunch of activists were stupid enough to call Canada's treatment of the Native people a genocide. So when the international community in Canada said...
I see. Brendan's poor choice of company besides, his argument that he can't be racist if he's telling the truth clearly relies on a nonsense dichotomy. Both true and false statements can be racist depending on the context of and intent behind their delivery. Citing a demographic statistic that shows disparities in racial outcomes to highlight policy objectives is very different than, for example, citing a demographic statistic that shows disparities in racial outcomes at a far-right rally. But regardless of whether or not you think lines like the following are racist...
Are you from China?
That's not a question.
Are you in the Communist Party or something?
You should agree that they're antagonistic and provocative. I mean, the dichotomy of true statements and offensive statements is also clearly false. If it is true, for example, that you are a fat bastard and I call you a fat bastard, I'll most certainly be right, and you'll most probably be affronted. Just as, when Brendan implies that the group's Chinese heritage, or alleged communism, is relevant to the incident, whether or not it actually is, they're liable to take offence. Even if you think the group shouldn't take offence at Brendan's lines, you'd have to agree that they could be expected to, especially given the heated circumstances under which Brendan delivers them. Thus, when he does, he understands that he is being antagonistic, which is of course exactly why he does it, because Brendan was in it for the bit. That's probably why he played the funny meme song, and it's certainly why he opened his stream with this comment.
Just stay there because there's a lot of kind of surreptitious activity going on in the station. I might need your help. So stay there, hit the like button, let's rock and roll.
If that doesn't signify intent, I don't know what does. Brendan knew what he was doing, and always intended to have some drama with the group. That's why he was so ready to twist Meng Ying's words when she approached him, and why he was so quick to hit us with the
"Oh yeah, of course we got the Chinese here,"
despite his friendliness with the group just prior. Brendan always intended to spar with the group, he just got lucky that they made an ignorant and impertinent request. Brendan was in it for the bit. And that may well be, but then again also might not be, why he kept calling the group Japanese. What? Well, look, I mean, it's kind of impossible to tell. Brendan intentionally calling the group Japanese when he knew they were Chinese would fit his established pattern of bit-seeking behaviour.
There's a load of Japanese people here doing... Can you see them? We've got a Japanese TV crew in the station. All sorts of Japanese people here today.
But it's plausible enough that he just made a mistake, so in this case I'd rather withhold the old j'accuse.
On that day in the station, there was a Japanese TV crew who I actually already knew, and the Chinese TV crew was standing right next to them, so they were all together in one group.
Originally, this argument was remarkably unpersuasive to me, because though there was a Japanese TV crew at the station, they were over here throughout the incident, not quite all together with the Chinese group. But I think Brendan actually does himself a disservice phrasing his point this way. The confusion was real, maybe, and just had nothing to do with physical proximity.
Jim, but just for a word, you're here with the illustrious Chinese...
or Japanese even.
The group being off to the left where Brendan looks, he actually first assumes they are Chinese, and knowing Jim is here on TV business, assumes they are his crew. Jim then corrects Brendan that his crew is Japanese, not realizing Brendan thinks the Chinese group is his crew.
We're making another program about the public piano, but this time we're
For Japan,
yeah, and we're using a presenter this time, a Japanese, young Japanese street pianist.
Oh, I like them.
I don't know
Did you see? Look at these. Hello.
Oh, wow.
Hello. Are you from Japan?
No, I'm from China.
Is she part of your crew?
No.
I thought she was part of your crew.
No, we're working for Japanese television, and the young lady is Chinese.
Brendan learns of his mistake, and then, not 2 minutes later, Brendan unlearns.
That's amazing.
We love the blues.
So anyway, we're here with the Japanese TV crew filming about public pianos.
Intentionally? I mean, it would fit the bit, but I'm equivocal. Meng Ying wasn't, but perhaps that's understandable. Hey, remember when I scornfully suggested the incident was replete with spies? Well, that concept possesses a property that lets me segue from mentioning Meng Ying. Meng Ying said on Twitter that a Christine Lee, who she had asked a question pertaining to law, was there with them at the station. Presumably, she is referring to the Christine Lee, a British-Chinese lawyer alleged by MI5 to be a Chinese agent of influence. Now, to me, this is thoroughly baffling, because while I can think of no reason why Meng Ying would lie about it, given it would be to her optical detriment, I simply cannot believe that the lady in the video, who looks 40 at the oldest, is the 60-year-old Christine Lee. I mean, what do you think? Is that Theresa May? The somewhat strange narrative Brendan and co came up with around this was that the arrival of the lady, under the assumption that she was Christine Lee, explained the shift from friendly to unfriendliness between Brendan and the group.
A well-known Chinese spy who's been identified in the video. When the spy turned up, that's when their attitudes changed.
This is just demonstrably false, though, let alone patently absurd. The lady is present from the beginning of the live stream, and it takes more than 9 minutes for the encounter to begin. The broader narrative idea too, then, that Brendan was bullied by the CCP, gains no credit from this even if the lady is Christine Lee. I mean, she spends the entirety of her time at the incident out of range of the microphone. What a tinfoil theory. Speaking of falsehoods, I found a couple in the things Meng Ying said after the incident. So, yes, this is the part of the Brendan Kavanagh bad video where I give various examples of where not to say he was bad. Just to preface the following arguments, though, I'd like to say a word in Meng Ying's favour, because while, sure, she, as the rest of the group, was wrong to assume that they could make Brendan stop filming, she in particular was consistently courteous and polite. In a sense, she's the antithesis to both Brendan and Mr. Angry. She's more akin to Jim. And I like Jim.
I'll put you in prison, mate.
In Meng Ying's first video, she implies Brendan kept them from using the piano for 40 minutes, suggesting this constituted some offence. In a later interview, she claimed that the piano was under repair when some of the group arrived, but maintained the spirit of the point.
The piano was under repair by the time we arrived. We see many people, they just go there and play the piano for a few minutes, but he actually, he stayed there and for a long time.
The piano being under repair is corroborated by Jim later saying to Brendan,
I've just been speaking to the tuner guy who came to repair it, and he said one of the problems is, people like you bash it so hard.
I play very gentle, listen.
And yeah, Brendan does proceed to make fun of Jim and the piano being hard to service.
That's the stuff. Play like that, we got that problem.
All sorts of drama at the piano today. Hit that line, Mark.
For our sakes, don't bash it too hard. It's got to keep going for a couple of weeks or more. Alright, okay.
God bless.
But that's besides the point. I contend that the group neither effectively waited 40 minutes, nor would have been done any injury had they actually. Brendan, unsurprisingly, agrees with me.
If you look at the live stream, you'll see that I was on the piano for a grand total of 9 minutes, 22 seconds.
Now, while Brendan is technically telling the truth here, his phrasing is a bit sneaky, because he was also using the piano for at least 13 minutes prior to the live stream. Given that this man's watch reads 10 to 3 and Mr. Angry's phone reads 10 past 3 at their respective points in the recordings, we can obtain that Mr. Kavanagh was at the piano while some of the Chinese group was present for at least 2:45 to 3:07, 22 minutes before the confrontation began. It's entirely possible Brendan and some of the group were there for 18 minutes prior to the first video's start to make Meng Ying's 40, but really it's besides the point. Both Jim and this guy from the Chinese group got to play during the 22 minutes, after all, and furthermore, it's reasonably clear that the group wasn't ready to commence their recording for the entirety of even the 22-minute period. I mean, assuming the camera's framing isn't obscuring anything, some of the group, including Meng Ying, just aren't even there until at most the 14-minute mark. And Adelina hadn't changed into her dress shoes until that period either, nor had the group produced the yellow cards, which were presumably necessary. Ultimately, though, so long as the group didn't ask Brendan if they could use the piano, he couldn't have known they wanted to, and so it's hardly fair to say he's making them wait. Even still, spending 25 or even 40 minutes at a public piano isn't an offensive amount of time. There are reasonable objections to Brendan's usage of public pianos that we will soon enough cover, but this is not one of them. Instead, it's just an exaggeration. So, Brendan is in the clear for hogging the piano. Whatever next? Maliciously editing the live stream upload? Indeed, Meng Ying claims just that. Though perhaps the charitable interpretation of the point, that people have only seen the incident from Brendan's side, is quite reasonable, it's pretty clear that Brendan didn't edit his livestream VOD. Simply enough, there just don't seem to be any cuts, and so this just isn't true. These errors aside, however, Meng Ying's videos are mostly mundane, and accurate at points. The main reason they landed so poorly is not so much their content, I argue, but their aesthetic, optics per se. For the purposes of convincing a, perhaps predominantly conservative, Western audience, the videos almost feel built to be counterproductive. For instance, the way Meng Ying presents her case that Brendan did intentionally insist the group was Japanese, whether or not you think she's correct, leaves it open for offhanded dismissal by introducing the point with, I think unintentionally, the implication that Brendan's initial and obviously genuine confusion was one of her examples of his intentional malice. Stylistically speaking, the use of melancholy piano is, while fitting in this case, almost the cardinal sin in the meta of drama/apology videos. Additionally, the reliance on appeals to her status as a woman and foreign national, while quite arguably relevant, are a bit clumsy, and will come off to much of the audience particular to this incident as platitudes before points. These poor optics aren't a mark against Meng Ying or the substantive content of her videos, some people understandably don't have so much time for internet drama, rather, they're a partial explanation of why, despite being mostly inoffensive in their overall message, the videos only further diminished Meng Ying's standing. The other parts of that explanation have something to do with the relative presence of Brendan compared to Meng Ying on the internet, the actual errors in the videos she made, the disposition of the mainstream media, a sort of guilt by association to the undeniably farcical Mr. Angry, and, dare I say, a little pinch of racial prejudice present in some of the audience. The conclusion I reach about the Chinese group excluding Mr. Angry is that their crime consists in their ignorance, tinged with a little arrogance and underwritten by hypocrisy. I do not, as Brendan and others suggest, think the group
wanted to turn St Pancras into the People's Republic of St Pancras.
Or whatever. The group are trying to stop Brendan filming when they have the intention to film in the same place. That's the hypocrisy and the arrogance. And the group don't understand that they have no legal power to compel Brendan to delete his footage or stop filming them. That's the ignorance. And it is ignorance, not malicious.
This is our right we're protecting, and that's it.
But what right? I don't understand.
Image right.
Image right?
Yeah. I always say, we're nicely approaching them, so this is our image. Is that right? I know, but we're walking around with saying, if they're filming there.
Evidently, Mr. Angry was under the mistaken assumption that image rights were a feature of British law. This ignorance makes some sense given that portrait rights are a fixture of Chinese law, indeed such a fixture that Meng Ying actually managed to break them, given the following documents are legitimate. As it turns out, the group and Brendan and the officer might all be ignorant of the actual legality in Britain, if I've got it right, and though it doesn't change the analysis regarding lack of courtesy, I reckon it's worth discussing nonetheless. The general assumption, as the officer articulated, is that Brendan can film because they're in a public place. But, they're not, so far as I can tell. Simply enough, the land and building is owned by High Speed 1 and managed by Network Rail. High Speed 1 and Network Rail are owned by His Majesty's government, though, and St Pancras sees a lot of public use, so perhaps there's some exception I'm unaware of. Then again, High Speed 1 certainly act as though the station is private for the purposes of filming, providing an application guide that quotes prices based on the type of project and group size. In fact, they even have a section on their website dedicated to the very public pianos Brendan makes use of throughout the incident, and oftentimes on his channel. Specifically, High Speed 1 asks that anyone wishing to perform, photograph, or film at the pianos for commercial gain make an application. And it's pretty clear to me that what Brendan uses the piano for constitutes commercial gain. I doubt he'd disagree, given he said himself on television just shy of a month prior to the incident that he makes upwards of £1 million a year from his YouTube business.
In a dungeon, my mother was lovely, I swear I'm gonna dunk down. That's Chinese. Oh, no, it's working, look, I heard it. Look.
Why you're touching her? Stop touching her! Don't touch her! Please, do not touch her! Please! You are not the same age. Please do not touch her.
And thus, Mr. Angry earns his name. And though this bout of shouting half defines the zeitgeist around this incident, I don't think it's particularly meaningful in itself. Needless enough to say, but for posterity, this sort of behaviour is clearly unacceptable and frankly a bit ridiculous. Mr. Angry actually confirms that Brendan wasn't touching Adelina when he says later on,
"Doesn't matter, you are approaching her with your hand."
So I suppose I've got that to add. After Mr. Angry's titular moment, the encounter becomes even more pointless.
Do not touch her. Are you miming me? Are you miming me?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
You're miming me.
I am, yeah.
You're miming me.
Yeah,
You're miming me.
I am, yeah. What are you going to do about it?
Wait for it.
So we might as well skip forward to when the police arrive. And if you think I've cut out any important context, Brendan's original livestream upload is still there, so you can check my work. After all, as Brendan said himself on the day of the incident,
the camera never lies.
Actually, the fact that the stream VOD is still there 2 months later is something worth touching on, given that, according to Brendan, and somewhat humorously the title of the video to this day, it has been beleaguered from the outset by a litany of takedown attempts. Indeed, Brendan was so concerned about the fate of the video that he made sure to mention it publicly more than 20 times over the month succeeding its upload. I made a supercut to prove it, and it doesn't even include the times he speculates on whether the video will come down, only those where he outright states it.
They are, the CCP are trying to get it taken down, alright? They're trying to get it taken down. They are trying to take down the video, right? They're trying to take it down. I don't know how the video is still up there. I don't know how long the live stream will stay up.
It's about to be taken down. I've just had a phone call. The video is on the verge of being taken down by YouTube.
On the verge of being taken off YouTube. They're trying to get it taken down desperately. This is obviously about the live stream, which they're desperately
it looks like YouTube is still pursuing the concept of actually removing the video altogether. They are sending in complaint after complaint after complaint to YouTube.
They're trying to get it taken down. It's actually a miracle that the video is still up.
It is a total miracle, thanks be to God, that the video is still up there.
Someone does not want this video on YouTube. God bless.
Now, despite Mr. Kavanagh's overwhelming concern standing in rather abject contrast to the fate of the video thus far, I wouldn't say it was unjustified. Was Brendan playing it up for the camera? Most certainly. He was in it for the bit, after all. But was he fabricating things? I reckon not. Though I have no experience with YouTube claim systems, and hopefully never will, Brendan's inbox is clearly lit up with something in the order of video under threat, as he shows us. I think it's a fair assumption to make that these complaints were filed predominantly by the group from the station. What you make of their resorting to that is up to you. For my part, I see it as the logical conclusion of the group's misunderstanding of British privacy laws, and therefore no point in favour of the narrative that the group was attempting to avail Britain of authoritarianism, or whatever. And while I would not advise the group pursue removal from a self-interested angle, nor endorse it from a principled point of view, I can understand the impulse to try it, given the severity of the general reaction. Anyway, on to the arrival of the Rozzers.
Listen, you can't say that. What, they're from China? They're waiting from China, for God's sake. Yeah, they've got a communist... Well, can I just say they're from China? Without the F. Sorry for the F word. But you know they've got... Listen, they are waiting...
According to Piers Morgan, which is something I've now said, and the narrative at large, the point you are meant to take from this exchange is that Kerry is being overly sensitive and trying to police expression. The problem with this point is that it takes the exchange too literally. Literally, yes, Kerry is telling Brendan that he can't say they're from China. Subtextually, however, she's saying he shouldn't provoke them. When she says you can't say that, she doesn't mean British law prohibits you from using those words in that sequence. Rather, she means saying that will cause offence and that will cause a fuss, so don't do it.
Right? There's a fuss being caused and I've come up to deal with it.
Brendan even engages Kerry on this point in the moment, demonstrating that he understands why Kerry has such a point against him, even as he argues that he wasn't responsible.
They are causing the fuss. I am not causing the fuss.
Though I believe this misinterpretation of the police's role explains the problem with the narrative about the incident, I would be remiss not to also mention Kerry's request that,
if we're having a police matter, you need to put that phone down.
Here, a little context and a little sympathy go a long way to providing a more reasonable explanation for this than some authoritarian bent, as is the typical attribution. Yes, Kerry is wrong to invoke the scenarios being a police matter as the reason Brendan should stop recording, but I'm sympathetic nonetheless. Kerry has good reason to not want Brendan to film her, just on a personal level. As she says herself,
this is going on your YouTube channel and I don't want it to go on your YouTube channel.
Bear in mind that Kerry is familiar with Brendan, and likely all too aware of his previous stunts involving security and his usual bit.
I know her quite well because I'm in the station, I have a good rapport with her.
I invite and encourage you to put yourself in Kerry's shoes, and consider how Brendan treated Daniel and Mr. Security from earlier. Clearly, Mr. Kavanagh is someone who torments workers, particularly security, for his audience. Would you, as an officer, want a feature on his channel? Certainly, you wouldn't want the result that Kerry, in the end, got. Brendan's bit ensures that, essentially, Kerry cannot win, because she, like Mr. Security, has to do things that Mr. Kavanagh will make fun of in order to actually do her job. I mean, how do you contend with someone who is willing to talk about you like this on public television?
She thought she was, I suppose, virtue signalling to her masters.
The only cure for a tinfoil hat is a bolt of lightning, and for better or better, cops aren't authorised to employ tasers against a mere antagonism. Kerry was collateral, because Brendan was in it for the bit. Hey, remember when I said that no one at the incident was armed? Well, no one was, but Brendan sure gave his audience of more than 2 million people a different impression.
But I've had, shall we say, a tip-off that actually the shouty guy was possibly armed.
Well, with extraordinary claims should come extraordinary evidence, so let's see what Kavanagh's got.
If you look at the video from the following, it's about 5 seconds in the video, and I didn't spot this, from 13:32, so that's 13 minutes, 32 seconds, to 13 minutes 38 seconds. So if you look at those 5 seconds of the video, I'll say it again, just write it down because you need to look at this because this is kind of like serious. You can hear the girl shouting, "Don't shoot him, don't shoot him, don't shoot him."
Oh.
Don't shoot him. Yeah, don't touch her. Don't touch her.
It doesn't get much more tinfoil than that. I don't think it should be necessary to tell anyone how irresponsible it was for Brendan to rebroadcast to his audience of millions the idea that Mr. Angry was illegally carrying a firearm on evidence amounting to someone else's hunch. The vastly more reasonable conclusion as to why Adelina was saying "don't shoot him," of course, is that she was telling someone not to shoot someone with her camera. That was kind of the whole deal with the incident, after all. Now, you may be tempted, as I was, to think better of Brendan's sense, but according to him, he actually went into hiding and lived in his van for 2 days. And indeed, Brendan has 5 videos published from the 21st to 25th of January starring him in his van in a particular field. Then again, he appeared on Talk TV on the 23rd and said himself in his first video on the topic that he didn't know if Mr. Angry was armed or not, and thought it was ambiguous. So, despite being totally equivocal on whether Mr. Angry actually was armed, he was so cautious as to go into hiding, but simultaneously incautious enough to also appear in studio? I present to you a different theory. You'll never guess what it is. Brendan was in it for the bit. Newton having a gun and the incident being a dramatic spy operation is absolutely gold. So whether he believed it or not, playing into it is exactly what Brendan would do.
Who would think that playing the piano could be so dangerous?
Whether or not Brendan was putting it on, he shouldn't have mentioned the suspicion publicly, rather contacting law enforcement discreetly. There aren't many more severe claims to make about someone than that they're illegally carrying a firearm, especially on such sketchy grounds. And please don't think to excuse Brendan by appealing to his phrasing. Rhetorically, through his equivocation and "I've had a tip-off" type expression, he allows himself to appear as though he's merely presenting the facts of the situation and letting people come to their own conclusions. Though Mr. Kavanagh may well have received such a tip-off, the very fact that he's choosing to air it, as well as his general manner and consistent calls for state investigation, imply that he intends you to take him seriously. Thus, although the material impact of Brendan's equivocal claim may be slightly diminished as compared to a hypothetical certain one, and he may by it avoid potential legal consequences, he reduces not his accountability. Ultimately, whether by foolhardiness or deception, I repeat that I don't think it should be necessary to tell anyone how irresponsible it is to broadcast to millions the idea that someone might be illegally carrying a firearm on a second-hand hunch. Brendan was in it for the bit. Okay then, but why does Brendan care so much about his bit? Remember those perverse incentives I mentioned? This is where they come in. Now, listen, peering into another's mind is a fraught task at the best of times, and I don't claim to have especial knowledge about Brendan's beyond what my research could reasonably be expected to obtain. However, though it's clearly not his sole inspiration,
I think it's better.
Don't shoot it.
I think that ignoring the monetary motivation Brendan has to practice his bit would derelict my due diligence. First and foremost, I'd like to be clear that I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with making money off of a bit or whatever, only that the content of the bit matters in determining the ethicality of the income. Equivalently, while there's nothing necessarily wrong with Brendan publishing tens of videos pertaining to the incident for a combined monetized view count of over 18 million, the content of the videos could entail otherwise. Re-uploading and monetizing a video of Meng Ying's that she removed, for instance, would constitute an obvious ethical breach, as, probably, would spreading plain misinformation, which we've established Brendan used various of his videos to do. Regardless, the point is that Brendan had and knew he had a significant monetary incentive to play up the drama both during the incident and after it.
I'll do anything to make a program.
It's a great TV.
And because Brendan was in it for the bit, that's exactly what he did. I won't try to put a number to how well it worked, but here Brendan is on Talk TV to give us an idea.
And you got a massive... How many followers did you get extra
I got 400,000 in a month.
Actually, he was on the show to perpetuate some anti-trans rhetoric, but I digress. To be crystal clear, there's nothing inherently wrong with capitalizing on an opportunity, but doing so at the expense of others' reputations and one's own honesty is another matter entirely. Also, the persistent flow of lucrative follow-up content makes it hard for me to hear Brendan say things like,
I'm happy to let this whole thing go,
and take them in anything but jest.
To be honest, I'd be happy to meet them, shake hands and say, let's forget about it.
I completely forgive and forget.
Typical forgiver and forgetter behavior.
I'm happy to let this go.
If you say so, Brendan. Anyway, while we're talking about ethics, I take the stance that even Brendan's non-bit related content is questionable. Fundamentally, as Heart of the Piano points out, Brendan's content is exploitative. It's not so much Brendan's playing that people are watching for, but the interaction with and input of the public. As such, when Brendan profits off of the videos, the operative factor in his profit is produced by other people, from whom he does not ask permission nor give any cut. Additionally, most of the people who Brendan interact with do not know who he is. Thus, they don't know going in that he has such a large following. A class of person most certainly exists who would be willing to be recorded and published to thousands of people, but not hundreds of thousands or millions. Brendan makes no attempt to mitigate this. And if you're wondering how Brendan could possibly produce his content under these considerations, then yeah, you're arriving at my point. Let me remind you that we're not dealing with lemonade stands or student projects here. Brendan makes from his YouTube channel upwards of £1 million a year. Surely there are responsibilities that should come with that kind of scale.
No film disclosure.
Piano's been mysteriously cordoned off. All very mysterious.
We appreciate. Usually I wouldn't come on and make a video like this.
I just started playing Chinese music and everyone from the Far East showing up.
This whole thing was a mini parable about the value of free speech.
Free speech. Democracy versus authoritarianism.
You're not obviously used to democracy.
These are the things that Brendan wants you to think the incident is about. Indeed, this is what the supermajority of the literature assumes it's about. I argue that the connection between the incident and freedom of expression, or liberalism, or authoritarianism, or indeed any ideological matter, is comprehensively tenuous. The incident is a sub-political personal drama well before it's substantially representative of any broader societal conflict.
The ability to play the piano in public is a fundamental human right, you know. And so it wasn't so much my feelings, it was more that I felt that it was one of the rare cases where you could see free speech prevailing.
Exactly what fraction of Brendan's insistence that the incident is about free speech comes from genuine belief or political conviction, I don't know. But to use an old example again...
Basically, I think it's a free speech issue. Hit the like button if you agree.
I think it's safe to say that Brendan's being in it for the bit played a role. In any case, the refutation is pretty simple. In order to claim that a free speech discussion maps onto the incident, one would need to demonstrate that the Chinese group intended, specifically, to suffocate Brendan's expression. Instead, the potential for Brendan's speech to be limited was a merely incidental result of the group's intention to prevent themselves from being published online. The group wanted to prevent themselves from being known, not to debilitate liberal values. And indeed, as we've established, their arrogance in pushing for it was the result of ignorance of the prevailing law, which they believed they were working within, even employing. I'm not suggesting to know whether or not any of the group value freedom of expression, or whether they esteem it as important as Brendan appears to, or as I do, only that in this instance, at the incident, they weren't gunning to see it demolished in any way. Oh, and here's a fun tidbit. Meng Ying's Twitter account was terminated after she used it to post about the incident. How does this figure in a conversation about free speech?
God bless Hong Kong. Glory be to Hong Kong. Glory to Hong Kong. I totally support the Taiwanese.
A similar logic applies to Brendan's insistence that the incident has everything and more to do with the CCP. You and I and he may all wholeheartedly support the self-determination of the Taiwanese people and the freedom of Hong Kong, etc., but it just has nothing to do with the incident at hand. The connection between Chinese policy and the group recording for Chinese TV is tenuous at best. Sure, call it propaganda, but it was going to be a clip of them singing with the piano. It's hardly quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong. Even if Meng Ying and Mr. Angry and Adelina had been clones of Xi Jinping himself, the group's ambitions were nonetheless limited to a sing-along, and their impertinence in assuming Brendan had to delete his footage a result of simple ignorance, not some governmental edict or political neurosis. I emphasize again that I don't make these arguments to undermine the importance of freedom of expression or the self-determination of Taiwan or whatever, only to demonstrate that Brendan misappropriates the positions when he applies them to the incident, because, well, Brendan was in it for the bit, and nothing brings in the crowd quite like Red China and freedom of speech. No need for the claims to make any sense, of course. Which is kind of the broader point here. By exercising his bit, Brendan feeds xenophobic and conspiratorial narratives while paying only lip service to genuine critiques of authoritarianism and its case in China. By the active perpetuation of the little conspiracies about Newton having a gun and the incident being a spy operation and so forth, Brendan foments nationalistic and xenophobic sentiment under liberal justifications of free speech and self-determination inappropriate to the situation. Brendan Kavanagh antagonized and incited the group in order to exacerbate the situation at the station according to his long-practiced tradition, then perpetuated the situation after the fact by spreading rumors and misinformation online in order to make money on his YouTube channel. In summary, as you well know, Brendan was in it for the bit. But that leaves something out, doesn't it? And I don't just mean the enjoyment Brendan obviously gets out of a good scrap, as Jim puts it. No, I mean the undeniable suspicion that arises from Brendan's at times insensitive rhetoric and the sort of company he keeps on TV. Now, that sort of thing alone is of course not enough to draw any conclusions, but in the video they are desperate to delete the livestream at 0:10, and in the video I just got back from St. Pancras to find this at 0:15, Brendan shows us his bookmarks bar. And there, second from the left, is a bookmark for a website by the name of henrymacau.com. When I came across this, having not heard of the website, I had a little poke around, and safe to say, the contents are fairly extreme, featuring such claims as all wars are orchestrated by the satanic Jewish bankers, there was no pandemic, and Hitler was a British agent. This is clearly an extremist publication. Under the most charitable possible explanation of why this site ended up in Brendan's bookmarks bar, one might perhaps suggest that he takes an innocent academic interest in such things. Under any reasonable explanation, however, one would have instead to suggest, as indeed I do, that Brendan Kavanagh is sympathetic to anti-Semitic, alt-right conspiratorial politics. After all, the camera never lies, Brendan, and removing the site from your bookmarks bar after realizing your blunder is not going to change that. It would seem, indeed, that appearances can be misleading when you sing the blues. But hey, maybe Brendan's just in it for the bit.